Okay, all you, Ryan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Markman. I'm a transition teacher for the Northeast School District in San Antonio. And we're happy to have Allison Schaberg here today with Consolidated Planning Group to talk about Medicaid waivers and a very popular subject, SSI eligibility and benefits. Thank you so much for this presentation.
Thanks, Ryan. It's a pleasure to be back with you today, and thank you everyone for joining us today. So a couple of housekeeping items. Your cameras are muted and your microphones are muted, but we know you're there and we're glad you're here. Today's meeting is being recorded, and you are going to get a copy of today's slides, so you don't have to take copious notes of every single thing that we talk about on the slides, because you will get that. And also some of our slides have links in them that will be helpful to you on your journey. So you'll have those links as well, so you won't have to jot those down. So we're going from 12 to 1 today. And as he said, we're talking about Medicaid waivers and SSI eligibility and preserving benefits. And so we want you to put your questions in the chat box. We're going to answer as many questions as we can. Ryan's going to monitor the chat box. He'll read those out to me. So we'll get through just as many as we can. So Consolidated Planning Group, who are we? What do we do? We are a holistic special needs planning firm. We do a lot of webinars every given week and month on topics surrounding special needs transitioning, planning in general, and a lot of the topics that come up, and they'll come up in this webinar as well, are topics that could really have a webinar completely to itself, and a whole 1 hour webinar. So in the chat box is my contact information, and we also will reference our YouTube channel. So we have a YouTube channel that you can subscribe to for free. There's no cost, and all of our past webinars live on that on that YouTube channel. So you can there's over 100 webinars out there, so you can kind of look at the topics that might be relevant to you and kind of the stuff that you're on in your journey, so that way you can listen to those as appropriate. So one of the things that happen on a pretty regular basis is that people talk about getting yourself on the interest list, or the waivers, or waiver interest list, or the waiting list in the state of Texas. And a lot of times, some people say we're on all of the waiting lists, when only in actuality they're only on a few of them. So I think the first thing that we want to talk about is that it is important to understand what the waivers are, and why do we even, why do we want them? And the first things first is the waivers are, they're Medicaid waivers, okay? So we want to maintain Medicaid eligibility in order to be eligible for waivers in the future. And the waiting list for these waivers in Texas is quite long. And some would suggest even up to 15 to 17 years. So the whole point of these waivers, though, is to waive off some of the cost of care associated with your loved one that has a disability. And so a lot of these waivers, they provide support services. They might provide attendance services or respite services, nursing services, and a lot of different therapies. And we'll kind of talk about those in a minute. But a lot of times people are signed up for this list and they don't even know when they actually come up on the list what they would actually be getting. So so what we have here on the screen is a list of some of the waivers that are here in Texas. We've got CLASS, and so there's basically an acronym for each one of these waivers. We've got CLASS, Community Living Assistance and Support Services. We have deaf, blind with multiple disabilities. HCS is a common one we hear about a lot, Home and Community-Based Services. Texas Home Living Medically Dependent Children's Program, MDCP. We've got the STAR Plus waiver, the Youth Empowerment waiver, and Community First Choice. So, we're going to kind of give a breakdown here of some of the different waivers and what they do. So CLASS is going to give home and community-based support to children and adults with related conditions. There's over 200 related conditions, like cerebral palsy, spina bifida, etc. The related condition must have occurred prior to the child's age 22. So one place, and I think we have this in our webinar, but The Health and Human Services website is a good place to look at some of these waivers out there if you want to educate yourself a little bit further on the waivers. Texas Health and Human Services. Another place that has a lot of good information on the waivers in Texas is Navigate Life Texas. Navigate Life Texas is just a good website in general to know if you have a loved one with a disability. So deaf, blind with multiple disabilities, it's a mouthful, DBMD. This gives services for children and adults who are deaf, blind, or have a related condition. So it's basically deaf, blind, and a related condition. So it's like three things. Home and community-based services, it gives services and support to kids and adults with intellectual disability or a related condition who live with their families in their own homes or in a small or group home with no more than 4 people. And then we have MDCP, which is children and adults who are 20 and younger who are medically fragile as an alternative to receiving nursing care, like within a facility. So all of these waivers are based off of the premise that our loved ones are best in home and community-based services as opposed to being institutionalized somewhere. So these waivers are designed to waive off some of that cost associated so your loved one can stay in their home or in community-based services. That's the kind of, another one of the premises behind it. So the STAR Plus home and community-based services give services to adults over the age of 21 to keep them in their community and not in a nursing home facility. Texas Home Living gives services to children and adults with an intellectual disability or related condition who live in their own home or family's home. So when we're talking about intellectual disability, the general consensus is the intellectual disability is an IQ score of basically 70 and below, 69 and below is basically what the definition of an intellectual disability is. The Youth Empowerment Service Waiver, I usually spend a little bit more time on this one because we've seen a lot of issues with mental health since the pandemic. So the YES waiver is an interesting waiver because this is one that in most counties in the state of Texas, there's not a waiting list for the YES waiver. This is home and community-based services to children under the age of 19 with serious mental, emotional, and behavioral difficulties. So I always think of this one as the alphabet soup when it comes to diagnosis. As, we have all these little letters behind everything. It's like ADHD, ODD, BPD, borderline personality disorder, bipolar, ADHD, oppositional defiance. There's a whole bunch of other ones that could come around, but thinking about depression, anxiety, kids that have been a threat to themselves or others. This could be kids that have run away, kids that are having a drug problem, kids that have been in trouble with the law. So that has to be the primary issue. So like the primary issue can't be my child has Down syndrome and they have these other, related conditions. The primary issue has to be kind of on the mental health side of the house. But the Youth Empowerment Service is basically a wraparound program for these kids, and there's a lot of therapy. They'll have some things included like possibility of like music therapy, art therapy, equine therapy. There's all kinds of different therapies, but then there's also, they kind of get essentially a coach. They don't call it a coach, but your loved one will have someone that they will work with individually. And then you'll also get a family support person as well. And this usually lasts about a year. I've seen them extended as long as 3 years. I saw more extensions during the pandemic, but this is not like a never ending, a waiver. Once you get it, they're designed to complete those services over the course of a year. So when it comes to community first choice, this allows states to provide home and community-based attendance services and supports to Medicaid recipients with disabilities. It helps with activities of daily living and health-related tasks, hands-on assistance, and supervision or cueing. It's designed to help individuals learn how to care for themselves. Okay, so some of the services that are available in most of these waivers are adaptive aids, financial management services, supported employment, employment assistance. Some have minor home modifications, respite care, services and all but MDCP, because Children's Medicaid includes it already. So MDCP is a little bit more inclusive. So then you have professional therapies. Think of every kind of therapy out there: OT, PT, speech therapy, and again, all of those other kind of different therapies like massage therapy, equine, music, those are all other types of therapies as well. Unlimited prescriptions, dental, and nursing. How are we on questions, Ryan?
We have one. If you're going to lose a waiver program such as YES, can you apply for another waiver program?
Yes, you definitely can. You should be on the waiting list for all of the waiver programs, and I'm going to tell you how to do that during this webinar today. But yes, you absolutely can be on the waiting list for the other waivers, and there is a such thing. So in the example of the YES waiver, when we're talking about like mental health issues, there are some such things, and we're going to talk about this too, as crisis diversion slots available for families that are in crisis. They may have a loved one that could be a threat to themselves or others. Maybe a caregiver has died or has become terminally ill. There's a lot of reasons why people might qualify for a crisis diversion slot. And what a crisis diversion slot basically does is it moves you from a 15 to a 17-year waiting list to right now, okay? But it truly has to be a crisis. So again, think of one of the caregivers becoming terminally ill. Think of one of the caregivers or parents dying. Think of major catastrophe has happened as a result of a natural disaster, and the individual is a threat to themselves or others. So those are some reasons for the crisis diversion slot. Some of the other waiver services are transportation, residential services, equine therapy, day hab, nursing. So all of those are examples. And just think of attendant care services, respite services. When you're paying for a caregiver, that gets expensive. So again, this is designed to defray some of these costs. Now, one of the things that we're going to do today, we're going to send you this, this presentation and the recording, but we're also going to send you a spreadsheet. Sorry, but it's like 27 pages long that describe the various waivers and what their budgets are. So each of these different waivers have different budgets. And a lot of the budgets are determined by the level of need. So your loved one and what their overall level of need is, and they'll do assessments for that. So some of the waivers have much bigger budgets than others. The HCS waiver has a much bigger budget than the class waiver. And so that is an example of that. So sometimes people might be on one waiver, maybe they're on the class, but then later on they come up to the HCS waiver. And so you can't have both. You can switch from one to the other. And you'll have a caseworker that will help you determine if it is in your best interest to keep your waiver that you have or switch to another one. And careful consideration needs to happen if you're making a switch from one waiver to another, because you just really got to look at it, because you could be losing valuable benefits. You might be gaining some on one side and losing other ones, and you've got to do kind of that, the good and the bad way before you kind of, switch over to one or the other. So most waivers are for all ages except for the MDCP and the STAR Plus. So those are the exceptions. And the financial eligibility for all waivers except for the Texas Home Living is basically 300% of SSI. So right now for 2022, the SSI numbers are $841 a month. So 300% of SSI for 2022 is $2523. So that basically means that that your loved one cannot have income over $2523 a month from all sources. Both it could be coming from any of the sources, earned income or unearned income. And when your loved ones come up on these waivers, it doesn't look at parental income, it's looking at their income. So we have a lot of families that have kids that aren't working at all, so there is no income. This may be a variation if we have families that are retired and their loved one is getting basically getting SSDIR ready. So the bottom line for these waivers is individuals must meet the functional eligibility criteria for the specific waiver. But the cool thing about getting on these interest lists is that basically you don't have to prove eligibility to get on the list. You prove your eligibility when you come to the top of the list. So some families may say, well, I don't need to get on the list because I don't think we're going to need help or we're going to need services or things like that. And I would say you just never know. So you need to go ahead and just put put them on the list. And if they're not eligible for it when they come up, that's okay. But you don't want to not put them on the list and then you end up needing it and then find out when you get on the list and you're starting that 15 years, that 15-year path. So 2 funding paths for waivers is the interest wait list. It's first come, first serve. It's statewide. And the wait can be as long as 14, and like we said, up to 17 years. It's designed to promote independence. It's going to prevent or divert individuals from institutions and address crisis. And it also helps individuals that may already be in an institution to move back into home and community-based services. Okay, this is an important slide here. So this is where I was talking about. A lot of people tell me, they'll say, Allison, our kid is on all of the waiver interest lists. And the truth is that oftentimes they're on Texas Home Living, Community First Choice, and the HCS. So there are various places that you're going to call to get on the various waivers. So your local intellectual developmental disability authority is where you're going to get on this list. So LIDA, LIDA, whatever you call it, that's where you're going to get on the list. And this is managed by county. So whatever county you live, you have a local intellectual disability authority. So this website in here, you'll be able to copy and paste that into your search bar, and it's going to take you to the page where you're going to put your zip code in, and it's going to tell you exactly who your local intellectual disability authority is, and that is the place that you're going to call and put your child on the list. Or if your child is already on the list, you think that they're on all the lists, you're going to call and verify where are they on the list, what number are they. How soon might we be getting, how close are we to getting a waiver in the future? So MDCP class and DBMD, you see an 800 number at the top of the screen here. That's MDCP class and DBMD. So if you call your local authority, guess what? You're not on all the lists because you're not on MDCP class and DBMD. So it's important that you understand that there's 2 phone calls here. The Star Plus waiver for basically 21 and over, there's an 800 number below. So I just wanted to talk about the local authorities and understand the interesting thing on how these waivers work and how you get on the interest list. I laugh about it. If I ever have time, I probably never will. I think Texas needs change in this. You would think that there would be a website for this, like just one generalized website where I can create a username and password. I can put my child's information in and I can get on the list. And then later I can log back into that and see where my child is on the list. That does not exist in Texas. So if you're wondering about that, it absolutely does not exist. You literally do have to call your local authority to find out where they are on the list. Your local authorities, some local authorities, they're not all created the same. Some are understaffed, some are not understaffed. They're supposed to call you every 2 years to let you know where you are on the list, and also just verify that you still want to be on the list. It is very, very important that if you change counties, that you let your local authority know that you're moving, and then you get connected to your new local authority. So you need to transfer your child's case to the new local authority when that happens. And when that happens, if you move from one county to the other, you don't start over on the list. You just have another local authority that you're going to be working with going forward. Okay, so this is probably one of the most important slides in the whole presentation. So we talked about the crisis diversion slots. So if your loved one is in crisis, you can contact your local authority and tell them that you would like to request an HCS crisis diversion slot. Your local authority will help with the process. One of the things, sometimes the local authorities are very helpful. Sometimes they provide misinformation on whether or not you can qualify for a crisis diversion slot. If you truly are in crisis, all of these local authorities have crisis phone numbers that are 24/7. And you truly think that you should qualify for a crisis diversion slot, you're working with your local authority, you're not getting anywhere, there is help for you. There are other agencies out there. You don't go to them first, you go to them second, but the ARC of Texas is one of them. And there's an organization in Austin called Every Child. They are another organization. Every Child has boots on the ground in most major counties all across the state, the major anchor cities, and then they kind of work in some of the smaller cities as well. But they've got boots on the ground there. So if you are hitting a brick wall, you're truly in crisis. I had two clients that got crisis diversion slots last year, and they truly needed them. And so let me give you an example. One family was a single dad and a kid on the autism spectrum who had become pretty violent, pretty aggressive. He was having problems with caregivers because he couldn't keep them because the kid was aggressive. He needed to work because somebody's got to pay the bills. And he had moved his mother. He had moved his mother here to care for the son while he was at work, and the son was aggressive towards the mother, and it just couldn't keep happening. So this was an example of a family that did get a crisis diversion. And another one that we had a similar situation, older disabled adult child, same kind of similar aggressive tendencies, anger and physical. We had grandparents that had guardianship of this loved one, and grandma passed away. Grandpa was still working. Grandpa was really having a hard time getting people to work because of that. So these are two families that we know for sure got crisis diversion slots. So just keep that in mind. And then we have the PASRR, diversion and transition from nursing facilities and specialized services. So that's just another thing to just keep in mind. So some of the things that we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about SSI and Medicaid benefits. And we're going to start by talking about how do you get started with special needs planning. So a lot of families have done significant planning. Other families, life is busy. This is one of many kids that you have, full-time jobs and everything else. But when we have kids that are transitioning, they're turning 18, a lot of things are changing if we have kids with disabilities. So one thing is to understand is to know the difference between a special needs planner and just a regular planner. As a special needs planner, special needs planners are nuanced in special needs. They understand having money in the right buckets and how to prevent you from losing or disqualifying from state and federally funded benefits. These waivers that we were just talking about all require Medicaid eligibility. So having money in the wrong buckets can cause your loved one to lose SSI, lose Medicaid, lose a waiver, and we don't want that to happen. We're nationally certified as Social Security advisors and members of the Special Needs Planning Academy. And that matters because and we're going to talk more about SSI and Medicaid and SSDI, but when we have a child whose disability started prior to age 22, they're going to be eligible for SSDI under a parent's record when a parent retires or goes on disability themselves. So, it's important to know the differences. We're going to talk a lot more about that. So we also want you to understand the differences between a special needs planner and a special needs attorney. So special needs attorneys get calls all the time that we should field. And we get calls all the time for what they should field, okay? So a special needs attorney is going to help you with such things as guardianship, special needs trust, wills, power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, supported decision-making agreements. That's what a special needs attorney is going to do. They're the paper. A special needs planner, they're going to help you determine such things as future care cost estimates. If you have a loved one that has care needs for the rest of their life, we need to plan financially. How much do we need to set aside? How much needs to be in their special needs trust to provide for their care in the future? So we're the money in the right buckets, money set up in such a manner that is going to help your loved one maintain any benefits and Medicaid that they are getting. So when you're starting to get, with this process, you want to gather all the necessary planning documents. What are these? These documents are basically all of your statements. What do you have available through work? Group health insurance, group life insurance, disability, long-term and short-term disability. These are what products do you have outside of work? It could be life insurance, it could be annuities, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, 401ks, 403bs, pensions, anything that you plan to fund your retirement with. And if you have remaining assets with, you plan to fund the trust, that's all part of those necessary planning documents. We're also going to include any wills, trusts, full Social Security statements, and full earnings records, which you can download yourself. Some people haven't noticed, but the Social Security Administration about 15 years ago stopped mailing your Social Security statement annually unless you're over age 60. So on SSA.gov, you can put that in the chat box, Ryan, SSA.gov. You can go out to the Social Security Administration. You're going to create a username and password, and you can download a PDF of your Social Security statement, and also download your full earnings record. It's relatively easy once you set up your username and password. But word to the wise, do not lose your username and password. Put it in a safe place, save it in your phone, save it somewhere safe. Because if you lock yourself out of the Social Security Administration website, then basically you have to go down there to get it unlocked. You talk about an act of Congress to get it unlocked. It's a real pain. So don't lose your username and password. We want you also to think about developing a letter of intent. We do have webinars on this topic as well. And a letter of intent, we basically call a family love letter to your family. As parents, we know things. We know things for our kids. I kind of jokingly say that we have forgot more than anybody will ever know about our kids, right? And so what happens if you are incapacitated or you are no longer here on this earth? Does somebody else know all of this information? This is it's important for all families that have a loved one with a disability, but it's especially important for families that have a nonverbal loved one with a disability. This letter of intent, we have a template for this. In fact, we'll include that. So we're going to include the slides. We're going to go ahead and include the letter of intent template, the form fillable document that you can use. But it is just basically a long list of everything your child, where were they born, what schools have they attended, what are their diagnoses, what meds do they take, what doctors do they see, what makes them sing, what makes them fall apart, all of the details that as a parent, And what I will say too, and this isn't an insult or anything, some families, the other parent doesn't know as much as you know. Like maybe one parent is a caregiver predominantly and one parent is working. And so what I have found is this is helpful even within your own household sometimes. So think about your vision of how you hope things will look for your special needs child, but more importantly, as importantly, is think about how your vision, what you want your future to look like for your own self, your own retirement. We're going to spend 25 to 35 years in retirement. A lot of folks have kids that grow up and get out. They graduate from college and they get out and you're footloose and fancy free. You got a loved one that's going to be with you for the rest of their life, not just yours. Your retirement, your picture of retirement is a little bit different, but there's no award for not having respite care. There's no award for not doing some of the things that you work so hard in your life to achieve and be able to do in your retirement. So you have to find balance with this. And what we have found is the families that do not find balance with this, their health declines. I mean, there are national studies on this where, families go above and beyond for their special needs loved one, and then their own health declines. And when that happens, you can't help yourself, and you certainly can't help your loved ones. So just think about that, and it's a real thing. Ryan, how are we on questions?
Someone had just asked, what do we do if we don't have money? So I'm not sure if that means if you don't have money to save or don't have money to pay for a planner or an attorney. Okay,
so we'll kind of address both. How about that? So if you don't have money, how do you fund the trust? If you don't have assets yourself, or you're wondering how you're going to pay for your own retirement, let alone fund a special needs trust for your loved one, there's a lot of ways that you can fund a special needs trust. And one of them is right here on the screen. It's life insurance, So for families that do not have, assets to fund a trust, so sometimes assets come from inheritance or other family members. But what a lot of families do is they have life insurance on the parents, and upon your death, the beneficiary is the special needs trust. So the life insurance basically funds the special needs trust. So that is one way. If you don't have a magical wand to wave and have millions of dollars to fund a special needs trust, that is one way that many families do that. And if you say, okay, we don't have assets, there are various programs as far as like guardianship and things like that. There are various programs for free guardianship or reduced charges for guardianship. You're going to be wanting to look at your legal aid. There's various, so you can check out Disability Rights Texas. Okay, so that's one place that you can check. And then there, in various cities all across the state, there are legal aid organizations that are designed to help the indigent as it relates to getting some of their documents in place, because there is certainly a cost associated with setting up a special needs trust. There's certainly a cost associated with guardianship. One other program, and I'm only saying this because when we put these events out, we put them out to everybody. So it's possible that we have people from all over the state. If you happen to live in Galveston County, there is a free guardianship program for basically everyone who lives in Galveston County. They have a kind of an endowment or a program that is through the county, and it is free, and it doesn't have to do with income or being indigent. So you can check your county to see if there's other ones. That's the only one I'm aware of. I typically hear of other programs like that. Is the Galveston one's the best deal on the planet. So that's help with guardianship. They're not going to help you with the special needs trust. Do we have any additional questions?
No, I was just adding the disability rights web address in the chat box.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so how are we going to fund care for our loved ones? So number one, we want to preserve eligibility for state and federally funded programs. So we're talking about SSI and Medicaid and Social Security. So, what I'm going to say is, the Social Security Administration is like the 10,000-pound gorilla, and it's confusing. So if you felt confused by that before, you're certainly not alone. They have terms that they throw around, and some of them are synonymous, and some of them sound similar, but they're not synonymous at all. So let's talk about that. So SSI and Medicaid is a means-based program. This is the individual is disabled and the individual is indigent. So a lot of our families don't understand, why has my child not qualified for SSI and Medicaid? And it's simply because it's a means-based program. And when your child is a minor, it's based off of the parent's income and assets. So if you have more than $2,000 assets in your name, you can have one house and one car. But if you have more than 2,000 assets in your name and your child is under age 18, even though they are disabled, they're basically not going to qualify for SSI. There are some Medicaid programs that they could possibly qualify for. MDCP is one of them. There's some one-offs that they may qualify for, or if they're getting a waiver, they might be qualifying for Medicaid because they're already getting a waiver. So Social Security. So a lot of families say, my kid's getting Social Security. And for the most part, that is 90%, probably 98% wrong. Your child is probably getting SSI and Medicaid, okay? So what is Social Security? Social Security is a worker-based program. As a worker, you are paying into the system. We have quarters. So when you download your Social Security statement, you're going to see how many working quarters you have. You pay into the system. So Social Security, SSDI, and Social Security Disability are all under that Social Security umbrella. So you pay into the system, and if you become disabled, it pays a disability benefit. And if you retire, it pays a retirement benefit. Well, a lot of our kids with disabilities, although they are disabled, because this is a pay-in system, it's not a means-based test, like where they're checking your income and assets, right? A lot of our kids aren't going to work. They've never worked. They're not going to pay into the system. So they don't qualify basically for Social Security Disability, even though they're disabled. except what you got to know is that what we want to do is we want to establish with the Social Security Administration that our child's disability started prior to age 22. So there's this little magic caveat with the Social Security Administration that if your child's disability started prior to age 22, that they are basically eligible for SSDI under a parent's record. Under a parent's record, 50%. So basically, when a parent turns on their Social Security or they turn on their Social Security disability, your disabled adult child would be eligible for 50% of the parent's record. So in that regard, if your Social Security is $4,000 a month, I'm just giving this as an example, when you turn that on, your adult child with a disability whose disability started prior to age 22 is going to be eligible for $2,000 a month. So in the example that they're getting SSI and then you retire, basically what's going to happen is they're going to switch over from SSI to RSDI, Retirement Survivor Disability Benefits. So if you become disabled or you retire, then the kids can switch over from SSI to RSDI under a parent's record. And so that'll continue at the 50% rate for as long as you live. If you pass away, then what happens is that it will be covered at 75%. Their amount will be increased to 75% of your amount for as long as your loved one remains disabled and alive, is basically how that works. So just understanding the difference between SSI and SSDI is just an important thing to note. And the magic age is 22, that the disability started prior to age 22. So what if you didn't know this? So what if you didn't know this, and what if your child is already over 22 and you've never filed for any of this stuff and nobody told you this? It's okay. You just have to have documentation that the disability started prior to age 22, and that would be documented by medical records or what have you. So if you haven't applied, the main thing you guys need to know is when I switch over, I'm talking about SSI now. I don't want to trip you guys up here. SSI and Medicaid. So even though your child has been denied maybe multiple times for SSI and Medicaid, when they turn 18, you need to know that you need to apply for SSI and Medicaid again, okay? Because everything changes. It's based off of their assets and their income. You want to make sure that your kids do not have more than $2,000 in their name outside of an ABLE account or a special needs trust. So there are two places that you can have more than $2,000 in your child's name that won't be counted against them for SSI and Medicaid purposes, and that is an ABLE account and a special needs trust. So as it relates to an ABLE account, these are things that we can help you set up. You can contribute $16,000 a year and an additional $12,880 if working. The disability for an ABLE account had to have occurred prior to age 26. So again, if the individual is older than 26 and you don't have an ABLE account, you can still get one. You just have to have proof that the disability started prior to age 26. The cool thing about the ABLE account is that it grows tax-free, and when you make withdrawals out of it, there's no taxes or penalties, as long as it's used for a disability, a qualified disability expense. And basically what you need to know is if it can be construed as achieving a better life for an individual with a disability, you can pay for it out of an ABLE account. So it is very loose on what you can spend the money on. So tutoring, school, co-pays, an iPhone, adaptive equipment, food and shelter. There's so many things that you can pay for out of an ABLE account, even a vacation. If it can be construed as achieving a better life for an individual with a disability, you can pay for it out of an ABLE account. Some families have a 529C for college that was started young prior to them knowing that their child might not go to college. So if you have a 529C for your disabled child, you can convert your 529C, and not a taxable event. You can convert $16,000 a year from a C to an A, and it won't be counted against them. Furthermore, it's important to note here that if you do have a 529C for your loved one with a disability, and maybe they are going to go to school and you want to keep the 529C. The 529C is not going to be used against your loved one as far as the asset count with the Social Security Administration, so they're the beneficiary, as long as the distribution from the 529C goes to a qualified institution and not to the beneficiary directly. So if it goes to the institution for school, it will not be counted against them. How are we? Are we good on questions so far?
Yep.
Okay, so we've kind of, we've talked about a lot of different topics here, and kind of hit the tip of the iceberg on some of them. And like I said, most of these topics, when we're talking about these topics, we have entire presentations for letters of intent, entire presentations for SSI and Medicaid. This is the waivers one, ABLE accounts, etc. But I think, this is a good list of the things that should be on your financial planning radar when it comes to planning for special needs. How to develop a comprehensive special needs care plan. Again, when we're thinking of retirement, so it's not just how do we fund care for this kid, right? How do we pay for this? But we're looking at retiring for 25 to 35 years. That's a long time in retirement. So when we are married, whether you're married or not, okay, so married, we've got 2 retirements, and we've got the special needs kid. It's like a third bucket for retirement. So if you're single, you've got 2 buckets for retirement, right? Is kind of what we're looking at. And so it's a big deal. And so the sooner you get started on it, the better. And I always say, hey, it's not about looking back. It's not about what you haven't done. It's about looking forward. It's about taking a look at what you have in place already. What is good? What do we need to build on? Where do we go from what we've already put in place? How do we build on what we already have through our employers or through outside things that we've that we already have? So it's about, it's really about looking forward and developing that plan, getting those future care cost estimates of how much is the care going to cost. And we're able to do those, and I would like to call them like small, medium, and large, right? So what happens is a lot of families come to us and they say, we are hopeful and we're optimistic, but little Johnny just isn't there yet. So we want to plan for the worst and hope for the best. And that is honestly what we recommend. And so we can show various doors to walk through as it relates to future care. So if you're, so we can show partial care. We can show full residential care. We can show at-home care with attendant services and things like that. And you can kind of see the various doors that you can walk through. And also, and we had this conversation yesterday with a family, is, you've got to plan this future, because we have some families that say, my child is going to live with us until I die. And so that might sound good when you're 40, but when you're 78 or 82, it doesn't sound as good anymore, right? You might not feel as well. You might not be as physically able. You won't be as physically able as you were when you were in your 50s or 60s at 70 and 80, So again, going back to your retirement and having that balance. So it's not, I'm not saying here, how do we push our kids out? I'm not saying that, but I'm saying having a plan after high school. So are they staying in the 18 plus program? Are they going to a transition program? Are they going to partial residential, full residential? What's happening after high school? Because what we want to prevent is that these kids are coming home and doing nothing. Right? It's not good for them. It's not good for you either. So plan early, plan that, and kind of, when it comes to the transition programs, look at these 18 plus programs in the public school. Look at the transition programs that are outside of the public school. Look at the various, there are places all over the state that work with individuals with disabilities that are pretty awesome. So consider touring some of these facilities, and you'll be glad you did, because what you'll find is that the residents there, whether they're, day program or residents, they're happy. They have community, they have friends, they are needed, they have a job. It's really cool. So having a program like that where your loved one is happy and needed and has friends and all of those things may provide some of that balance that we were talking about. Beneficiary designations is an important thing, and if you've attended our webinars before, sorry if I'm a broken record, but it's that important. I have to be a broken record. 98% of families have their beneficiaries set up incorrectly. Okay, and having your beneficiaries set up incorrectly are going to cause your child to lose state and federally funded programs. Okay, they're going to cause them not to be eligible for a Medicaid waiver. A lot of times what families have done is they make spouses the beneficiary. So if I die, my spouse is going to get the money. Then what they do is they set up a contingent beneficiary, or basically if I die and my spouse is already dead and gone, then who gets the money? Well, what a lot of families do, and if you did this, like I said, you're not alone, it's wrong and you can fix it. They say, well, if I die and my spouse is already dead and gone, then that's easy. I would like the money divided equally amongst my children. And then they name the children outright. And so the reason that this is wrong is, number one, we don't want to leave money to minor beneficiaries. So if you have minor children, you shouldn't name them outright as a beneficiary, because if you do, what happens is when you die and the child is still a minor, that money sits in trust until the minor turns 18, and then they give them all of the money. So I know your kids are brilliant, mine are too, but most kids cannot handle large sums of money, like less than 1% of them. So we don't want to set it up that way. We want to set it up in a trust, so the trust spells out how and when they get the money. They can have money for college, maybe they have money for a wedding, maybe they have money for a down payment on a house, or maybe a car, but it's kind of doled out to them. Maybe they get more money by achieving success, by graduating college, or things like that. So that's one way to do it. The other thing is we don't ever want to name our special needs kids directly as a beneficiary, because if we do, then they get the money directly, and then they have more than $2,000 in their name, and they disqualify from SSI and Medicaid. So, so if you have done this, so if you're taking notes, just write down to check all of your beneficiaries. I'm talking about life insurance at work, life insurance outside of work. I'm talking about stocks, bonds, mutual funds, where there are any kind of beneficiaries set up on the account. Check the status of your beneficiaries. You can fix this for free. You do not have to pay us to do it. You can call and request a change of beneficiary form. If it's with your employer, you can call your HR department and request a change of beneficiary form, and then you can update your beneficiaries accordingly. So the way that we leave money to our special needs kids is to the special needs trust for the benefit of said child. So if we're saying our kid's name is John Smith, it's going to say to the special needs trust for the benefit of John Smith, as opposed to naming John Smith. That's the right way to do it. Now, one other really super important thing that I want to talk to you about is your parents, grandma and grandpa, family members, affluent family members that might leave your loved one money. You need to have intentional conversations with them too, because grandma and grandpa's financial advisor is not a special needs advisor, and they don't know. And when grandma and grandpa comes and say, hey, I have a grandson and he's disabled and I want to leave them money, they say, okay, great. And they leave it to John Smith. That's what they do. And so, so it's really, really important to have these meetings and intentional conversations with any loved ones that might be giving money to your child. So what happens if your child does get money? You didn't know. Grandma and grandpa, mom and dad keep their cards close to their chest. They don't talk about money. You had no idea that they were going to leave money to your kid. If little Johnny gets an inheritance, or he gets money, then you're going to have to hire an attorney, and you're going to have it court ordered to a first party special needs trust. There is a Medicaid payback on a first party special needs trust. There is no Medicaid payback on a third party special needs trust. So we want to leave money to our special needs kids in a third party special needs trust. This is the bottom line. What questions do we have, Ryan?
The question is, when should we start planning a financial plan for adulthood? For example, my child is 12 and will be with us long term.
So I would say immediately. So the sooner the better. Whenever you have a diagnosis, so whether they're 2 or they're 12, you want to start planning, and you want to start, looking at the various programs. Like, for instance, your 12-year-old, guess what? There's a program in the state of Texas that's called vocational rehab. It starts at age 14. Okay, so 14 to 22, there's vocational rehab services, and this is designed for kids with disabilities that have an impediment to employment. They do testing, they do assessments, they put a kind of a work plan in place, and it is designed to get them up to speed so that way they can have competitive employment, not underemployment. 80% of individuals with disabilities are either unemployed or underemployed. So it's really, really important that you know what these resources are. So the sooner the better. And like I said, you know, it's not a matter of looking back, it's a matter of looking forward. So don't even beat yourself up about what you haven't done or what you don't have in place. You know, it's about getting started. And so when we're looking and kind of developing a plan for families, we do a lot of, we ask a lot of questions about the planning that you've done so far. What is important to you? We do a lot of listening about what is important to you. Who are the future caregivers that you have in mind? Do they know it? Is it set up? What documents do you already have in place? How long ago were they done? Just like a special needs advisor like we are and a special needs attorney, you know, they're not, a generalized attorney is just that, it's generalized. Your situation is specialized. You want to work with people that are nuanced and special needs. So a general attorney can set up a special needs trust and they can set up a guardianship, but a lot of times we see trusts every single week that are wrong. They're not going to qualify for in the eyes of the Social Security Administration because maybe there's not a Medicaid payback or et cetera. So it's really just important to work with the right professionals as you're, you know, kind of looking at your plan. And they're going to take a look under the hood. What do you already have in place? What is lacking? What do you have set up correctly? What needs some adjustments? Those are some of the things that we would be looking at. Do we have additional questions?
Yes. How much should you expect special needs planning to cost or a special needs attorney? And how do you find the right professional?
So the Special Needs Planning Academy has planning professionals on their website. So that's one way that you can look at it. The sad thing is, and the truth is there are very few special needs planners. There's more special needs attorneys. We have referrals for special needs attorneys that we know are good, honest, and that their prices are fair, and we have them all across the state. So, so we're able to provide solid referrals in that regard. And so when it comes to guardianship and special needs trust, there's a wide range of prices. So guardianship can be contested or not contested. If it's contested, it's more expensive. If it's not contested, you know, it could be anywhere from say $2,500 to $5,000 for guardianship. A special needs trust, I've seen them as low as say $1,200 on up there to $5,000. It just kind of depends on the nuances of the trust and things like that. As far as our services and, you know, special needs planning, we have several doors a family can walk through. So our initial consultations are always free. And so we seek to understand a little bit more about you, what you already have in place. So we're not here to rain on any great planning that you've already done. We want to build on that foundation. So depending on what you already have in place, if you already have done a financial plan, it just needs to be updated or et cetera, will depend on the door that you would walk through. So so I would say that those services range so somewhere between $1,000 to $3,500, kind of depending on the level of services that you're needing. But one of the things that we can also do as National Social Security advisors, we can truly talk to families and get them teed up. So there are services, there are places that you can hire that will kind of basically handhold you and do all of the paperwork and everything that you need for the Social Security Administration. We tend to not do that, and we don't charge for it either, right? So we, in all of our packages, then we'll talk to you about what do you need to do, what do you not do, who do you call, where do you call, what do you do, how do you get yourself in the, set up for these things, and we provide those resources. So parents that are feeling like, oh my gosh, I don't know where to start, or I feel like I'm drinking from the fire hose, we partner with families just like you to kind of help walk you through that process and help make it a little bit easier. Because and I didn't mention this at the beginning, I mentioned it a lot. I'm a parent, so I eat, sleep, and breathe this. I have 4 kids. I have 2 kids with disabilities, 2 that have transitioned. And how these webinars were born, it's not that we have an exorbitant amount of time to do these webinars, but I think I felt so angry when we were going through this process with my kids, because I know this backwards and forwards. I eat, sleep, and breathe this, and I would tell you it was difficult. So these webinars were born because I wanted to put the tools and resources in your hands so you can advocate for your child and go after what you need. And so we can kind of dispel some of the myths and some of the confusion out there, because there is so much confusion. So I'm with you. I know where you are. So when you say you're feeling like you're drinking from that fire hose, or that you kind of don't even know where to start, I totally feel your pain there. Do we have any additional questions?
A parent just asked if they should really be doing all this if they know their child can be successful, they just have emotional problems.
So yeah, and I have one that falls into that line as well, because, and it just depends on how old they are. But so you can say just has emotional problems. Well, those just emotional problems turn into problems at work. They can't keep relationships. They can't keep a job. So some of those things happen. It might not be the case for yours, but other things happen a lot later too. So what we tell families is we're hoping for the best. Okay, we want to plan for the worst and we want to hope for the best. And when the best happens, guess what? You have a more lucrative retirement. So if you don't plan, then things fall apart. So in an example of don't plan and things fall apart, I'm not a doctor. I don't play one on TV. However, there is a lot of, we do see a lot of families where they have kids on the autism spectrum. There is a high propensity for schizophrenia and other mental health issues, or mental health issues that went from manageable to unmanageable in that phase of, say, 16 to 25. So so a lot of times we can see things ramped up from a mental health perspective. And also, I know that we're emerging from the pandemic, but we've also seen kids that were, again, manageable that went to a phase of unmanageable. It was high all across the United States, not just in Texas. If you were to try to call a psychologist or psychiatrist right now and get in, most of them don't have any availability. Some of them are not even taking a waiting list because they're that far behind. They're that full with things that are going on. And for most of them, the waiting list is anywhere from on the low end, and this is a happy dance if this happens to you, 3 months, on up to over a year to get in with that. So again, my recommendation is plan for the worst, hope for the best. When the best happens, we're still promoting independence with our kids. We want them to be successful. There are programs out there. We have whole webinars on college for kids with disabilities. There's programs out there. We want our kids to go to school. Maybe it's a certificate. Maybe it's a degree. We want them to go to work. Maybe it's a registered apprenticeship through the Department of Labor, and you can learn more about that on their website. There's all kinds of paths forward for success for our loved ones, and we want that. But in the meantime, while we're getting where we're going, because literally every single day somebody says, I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic, but we're not there yet. And so if that's you, and the thing is even with our neurotypical kids, sometimes we're not there yet, right? Because our kids' brains don't even fully form until they're 26, right? So when we have learning differences, when you have ADHD or some of these other diagnoses and developmental delays, their maturity is much slower than that. So even though, they're 26, they may not have arrived yet. So that's where we want to plan for that. Okay, so I just wanted to take a moment to say meet the team. A lot of times I'm doing these webinars, so a lot of times I'm the face of Consolidated Planning Group, but we have an awesome team. We have 4 other staff that are not pictured on here. I need to update this slide. But we work on a collaborative team at Consolidated Planning Group. Combined, we have over 60 years of experience. We are all certified as National Social Security advisors and members of the Special Needs Planning Academy, and we are definitely ready to help you with your special needs planning. And so I had talked about a free personalized consultation. If you want to talk more about your situation and have kind of a look under the hood or get help with future care cost estimate, we can definitely help you. This QR code will be in the email that's going to go out later today, and you can set up a free personalized consultation to meet with us and talk a little bit more about the planning that your planning needs and what you've already done so far. And we're happy to answer any additional questions that you have if you're kind of thinking about applying for SSI and Medicaid. You feel like you need some help with that. We've got our YouTube channel and our Facebook page. Oftentimes our Facebook page is going to have future events that are future webinars that we're going to be what we're going to be talking about. So you can, look at that, subscribe to that, and you'll get notifications on those future events. And then all of our past webinars are going to live on our YouTube channel, so you can check that out as well. And having said that, do we have any additional questions before we wrap up? I got 1 o'clock.
Yeah, there was one last question. How do I get Medicaid based on disability for my son?
So, okay, so that is a good question. And one thing I want to mention is I think there's 107 Medicaid programs in the state of Texas. So Medicaid, again, is a means-based program. So you financially, depending on your son's age, if your son is 18, it's based off of his assets, no more than $2,000 assets in his name. If he's under 18, it's based off of your assets, 1 house, 1 car, $2,000 in your name. The Health and Human Services website, you can go out to the Texas Health and Human Services website and you can apply for their Medicaid programs. You create a username and password, you put your information in, and it will spit out what Medicaid programs that the child may qualify for. If the child is a minor and they're considered medically fragile, think of trach, think of G-tube, think of ventilator, think of those types of things. There are other reasons why they would be considered medically fragile, but like autism, for instance, is not necessarily medically fragile. They may qualify for MDCP, but the Health and Human Services website is the place to go. You can call them, you can go to their website, you can follow their prompts, get your favorite beverage and sit down and be patient because it's a slow process, but anyway, it's worth it. They're going to go through all of those programs. I mean, you can call the Health and Human Services phone number. It is annoying and the hold times are long, but what I recommend is you call right when they open. I think it's 8 o'clock. You can look up their hours. If it's either 8 or 9 in the morning, they're not busy then, but basically any other time during the day when you call, they're really busy and the hold times could be an hour. So just be aware of that and plan to call early if you're going to call them. Okay, so the HHS, she's got that website in the chat box. So thanks everyone. We went just a little bit over. It's certainly been my pleasure, Ryan, to partner with you guys again. Look forward to coming back together. Thank you everyone for taking your time this afternoon. And I wish you well on this journey. And just know you do have this. You've got this. You're not dumb. This is unnecessarily complicated. Everything we have to do as parents with individuals with a disability is unnecessarily complicated. So thanks so much. It's certainly been a pleasure. You guys will get the slides, the spreadsheet, the waiver budget spreadsheet, and the template for the, I'm calling it the family love letter, the letter of intent. You guys are going to get that in your email that goes out later today. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.